Hi there, Natalie with you today with a new process video for Pinkfresh Studio, and this time I'm using the Let's Stay Home collection to create a brand new layout. And I had an idea that I wanted to use, I'm going to say a film strip to create this layout. So I'm going to start by creating the background, and I really want to play with the really dark tone of navy that the collection features, and the navy that or the blue should I say, sorry, it's kind of has a tone of purple. So I've pulled three colors from the Liquid Watercolor collection from Pinkfresh Studio. I'm gonna be using sapphire, sky blue, and violet, but to create that deep blue tone I'm gonna mix a bit of sapphire and violet, and I am using actually heavy cardstock. This is 140-pound foundation paper. This is from the Vicky Boutin collection, and it's really heavy cardstock. You can use watercolor paper, and if you choose to use regular cardstock, then I'll suggest that you add yeso so that you avoid warping your paper. So all I'm doing right now is just mixing the liquid watercolors. I'm starting with sapphire and violet, and I'm mixing in my little piece of plastic or acrylic, and I'm adding water just to dilute it, and I'm gonna make the application of the color onto my cardstock using a brayer. And the brayer, first thing the brayer is gonna do is just gonna create a soft application. It's gonna help me apply the color faster. It's gonna create that dragged effect. And the other thing why I like applying a paint through a brayer is you apply very little water onto the paper. So you're gonna see that my paper is barely gonna even move, and what I mean by move is it's not gonna be warped that much because there's very little water applied. Now, the only thing that when you apply paint through a brayer, you create the drag lines or the marks of the brayer. So to soften those edges, you're gonna see that I'm gonna use the leftover ink that I had on the plastic just to soften the edges or the marks that the brayer left behind. And I'm also gonna add a little bit of sky blue just to bring another shade of blue onto the background, and just to help me again to soften the edges. That's all I did for my background. You're gonna see that the paper barely warped, but I'm gonna make sure that it dries completely before I continue working. I don't like to heat my papers with the heat gun because that kind of bakes the paper. It makes because papers form as think of as a grid. When you heat it up, you make the molecules move, and that's what creates the valleys. So I'm gonna let it dry completely on its own before I come and continue working. Now, one of the things that you're gonna see is that I rotated my layout 180 degrees just because the pictures are facing the dog, my baby, and my daughter are looking to the right, so it just makes more sense to have to rotate the background. So what I'm gonna do right now is bring a little bit of more interest onto the background, and for that I'm gonna use the rubber stamp. This is the floral diamond, and I'm using sapphire crisp ink. That's one of the products from Pinkfresh Studio, and you're gonna see that I'm actually gonna create the impression onto the background. I'm just adding enough ink just to the center of the stamp. I don't want the entire image. I want to have just like a broken image onto the background, and you're gonna see that in some areas it looks like double stamping. I'm okay, my picture is gonna cover that. I just want to have those edges, and I also extended it a bit to the right because I know that once I put the picture I need something to show on the right. And I'm also gonna add a little bit onto the right corner or the right side of the layout just so I can connect something in between. I'm thinking my title is gonna go there. Now, one of the things that I wanted to use on this layout was florals, but I wanted to bring something really neutral. So I went out of camera and used the Keep Going stamp and die set to create all those florals. I just stamped them with black crisp ink, the same thing from Pinkfresh Studio, and I just die cutted them. And I'm using one of the journaling bits. There's quite a few envelopes, and I love using them in my traveler's notebooks, but I want to use them also. I want to give you an idea of how you can use them on your scrapbook layouts. So I'm actually gonna use it to kind of have the florals coming out of the envelope. But before I put everything together, I'm actually gonna create or give the picture a few layers. And for that, I want to bring some color because there's a lot of blue on the background. So I'm gonna bring a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red and pink. For that, I'm using pieces of paper from the Kind Hearts. That's the mustard kind of rhomboid paper. I'm actually gonna bring a bit of the Better Things Ahead, and that's the one that has those rainbow squares. And I'm also gonna use the paper's called Best Place to Be, and that's the one with the pink chevrons. But once I was gonna cut it from the big piece of paper, I realized that you're gonna get a lot of white space. So my choice was to go to the 6x6 paper pack and just use the same paper in a smaller scale. It's gonna give you a little bit more of the pink that I'm trying to add on to this layout. So I'm just gonna cut a strip and attach it behind the envelope. I added a little bit of foam adhesive underneath the picture just to make it like kind of pop from the envelope. And one of the things that I don't think if you saw it is that when I glue the picture onto the envelope, I'm not going to glue it completely until I don't put my florals in place. That way I can lift the picture and add things behind it. So one of my ideas is that I want to have the florals coming from the pocket, but I don't want to cover the pocket completely. So I could have added quite a bit of florals and cover it, and I don't do that. I'm just gonna add one or two. I'm gonna add a few to the left of the picture strips, just so that, like, you know, it has the idea. Think of it as the florals being fireworks behind the picture. I'm gonna add a few to the right hand side of the picture, and that's coming off the envelope, but I'm not gonna cover the entire pocket. I wanna see that soft edge so that I know that it was a pocket. And all I'm doing right now, you're gonna see that I'm adding a little piece of foam adhesive behind the florals, but I'm not gluing it in place. I'm not peeling off the sticker until I have everything in place and I'm happy with what everything looks like. Now you're gonna see that when I was working with everything to set up my layout, I found this little sentiment that said Homemade Memories, and I thought that was the perfect title. And that's why I created those little pieces with the floral diamond kind of pointing towards that center space. But once I put it down, I realized that I need to bring a little bit of the mixed media that I added behind the envelope to the right hand side, where I added a little bit of the stamping. So I'm bringing a little bit of the sky blue liquid watercolor. I'm just diluting it with a bit of water, and I'm just gonna kind of paint it on top of the little piece of stamping that I have there. And I'm okay if the stamp kind of gets like softened, it kind of runny. I actually like the look of that, and I'm actually gonna extend also right on the right of the envelope underneath those florals, just to help like soften the stretch the watercolor and soften the detail of the stamping. Once that's ready, I can actually start assembling everything and putting everything in place. So one of the things that I am actually gonna do is while everything dries, I'm gonna build one of the bows. And I have a lot of green and blue that are very prominent on the layout, so I thought I'm gonna bring one of those peachy kind of orangey bows, and I use the one that has the 4 loops, just because it's gonna bring a kind of bold pop of peach onto the layout. So my key to building a bow is having a paper clip or a paper clamp, I don't know how you call them. And what I do is, once I glue the edges onto the center of the bow, I'm actually gonna clamp them together until they dry, and that's gonna prevent from the bow from popping up. Once I have that, I'm gonna twist, so all the edges where I added that center where all the loops join, I'm gonna put them towards the bottom on top of, I'm gonna say, the tail of the bow, and then I'm gonna tie it together with the little centerpiece, and I'm gonna make sure that everything is at the bottom so that the bow won't pop. And again, I'm gonna use a paper clip, hold it together until the glue dries completely, and that's gonna secure my bow. And I'm gonna put that bow right at the junction between the pictures and the envelope, and that happens to be right at the bottom of the second picture or the film strip. So all I'm doing right now is just putting everything together. You saw that I actually cut one of the keep going florals. The image comprises of 2 flowers, so I cut the bottom one, and I'm actually gonna glue it underneath the envelope. That's gonna bulk up the cluster, and then I'm gonna use the top floral with the little branch coming off in that right area where I added a little bit of mixed media, and that's just gonna create the perfect spot for my title. Now, one of the things that I realized at this point is that I need to add a little bit more color onto the right of my layout. So to do that, I'm actually gonna trim the left hand side of my layout by around 1/2 inch, and then I'm gonna add I'm gonna make up that 1/2 inch on the right of the layout using strips of paper. And I'm gonna bring again the the Kind Hearts paper, which is the B side, has that mustardy tone that I'm using. And I'm also gonna bring the Best Place to Be paper. That's the one with the pink chevrons, just to add the strips and kind of mimics the layers that I have behind the picture. And if you see the picture, that's my daughter and our baby. And our time in quarantine, we live in an apartment, and we didn't let them go outside that much, especially with the dog, because he likes to spend a lot of time outside. And with all that, it's kind of scary sometimes. So my daughter likes to hold him on her lap and make him see the world through the window. So I usually take lots of pictures of them doing this. So I'm gonna use a few of them to create this layout. Now, one of the things that I'm gonna use quite a bit on this layout are those chipboard circles. And the first one that I used was the little heart with the home, and I added it to the top, to the top left side of my pictures. So I'm gonna bring another one, but I'm gonna use a peach one just to bring some of the color onto the title cluster. And I'm gonna create a cluster in that area. I'm gonna use some of the label stickers from the cardstock sticker page. I'm gonna cut some rounds just to bring some circles. I'm gonna cut some blue, some green, just to bring the colors that I have on the left onto the right. And I'm gonna add a few more of the sentiments, the little phrase sentiments from the cardstock stickers. After that, I'm actually gonna start working on creating a few more little clusters of embellishments. And I'm gonna go, like I said, I'm gonna go with a lot of circles on this layer. So you saw that I added that little rainbow, and I added that little circle heart to the flowers on top of the title. I'm gonna create a cluster, kind of balance the one that I already have on the title onto the bottom left corner of my pictures. I have quite a space there, so I'm bringing again some of the labels, some of the circle sticker labels, a few more sentiment phrases, a little flower. And just to tie everything together, I'm actually gonna use enamel dots, and that's just gonna create little pops of color in all the different tones that I'm using. Now I have plenty of space to add my lines or journal right underneath the title, and you're gonna see that I'm just gonna draw lines with pencil, and I'm gonna take it actually off screen to write all about the story. And like I said, the story is about how much my daughter loves the dog, and she will actually carry him and show him the world from a totally different point of view than what he will see. After I have that, one of the things that I love adding to my layouts is stamp sentiments. And I actually pulled out the Just Because stamp set just because it has these beautiful sentiments in it. So I am going to use sapphire ink again. This is one of the crisp inks from the Pinkfresh Studio collection, and I'm gonna stamp sentiments around the clusters that I have on the layout. So you're gonna see that I'm actually gonna stamp a first, second, and third generation, and what that means is that I am actually gonna add ink and stamp it twice onto my layout, and then I'm gonna repeat stamping until it fades completely the ink. So that's just gonna add a bit more interest onto the background. It creates a faded effect that I'm looking for, and I love how this turned out. Honestly, this layout, I had a faint idea what I wanted to create. I knew that I wanted a column of color, I wanted a film strip, but then the rest just came together quite naturally and organically. And I love how this turned out. I love the combination of the colors. I love using the pocket, and I hope it actually inspires you to use some of these on a project of your own. Remember that you can find all the materials that I used in the Pinkfresh Studio shop. If you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to contact me, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's always tons of content being added here. Thank you so much, and take care, guys.